The APRA Foundation is going to offer a fellowship. It will be a multidisciplinary fellowship. The purpose of the fellowship is to find and support people who have managed to survive at a high level professionally, making contributions in two disparate, unrelated creative fields. And this can be any two fields or more, of course, two or more fields. Someone can be a physicist and a composer. They can be an excavation archaeologist and a performance artist. They can be a mathematical logician and also a choreographer. So it's for any combination of fields. The idea is to find people who, for one reason or another, and who understands why this ever happens, have not been subject to that truncating process that I think really everyone goes through as they get older, where you start out as a kid and you do all sorts of things. Kids always draw and they always sing and dance. And then some kids love to look at the sky through a telescope. And who knows why kids ever stop drawing? Because they all seem to draw at a certain age. And then most of them stop. And then around the age of 20, when they're starting their professional education, they get the message that dancing is undignified. So then they stop dancing. And then all they do is look in the telescope and they become an astronomer, say. And that's a wonderful thing. But along the way to that point, all of these creative limbs get chopped off in order that they can fit the requirements of the professional institutions that they have to be in order to survive doing anything that they love. The way I'm conceiving the APRA Foundation Fellowship does not threaten the purity of a discipline at all, because it requires that someone be a specialist in two different disciplines. That means that they actually, that they not bring other things from other disciplines into what they do in one discipline. It's simply that they are able to exercise the skills of more than one discipline and pursue more than one discipline. I know how important it is for people to have these different sources of self-expression and different sources of intellectual and creative fulfillment. It can't be just one thing, because sometimes things in one job are not going particularly well. Your telescope breaks and your lab is underfunded, so you can't look at the stars anymore. And now, if you've forgotten how to draw and you no longer dance, you just feel awful. In any academic field, you just do require constant education, adult education, even after you've achieved tenure, say. You just keep on having to study and update your skills to stay with the field, and that degree of specialization is very hard to maintain given the time and energy and resources that go into it, alongside of some other area of specialization in some other field. See, I don't think it's impossible. I definitely think that were academic institutions organized to support this, it definitely could be done. But see, I don't know of any academic institution that supports this. What they do is they look for interdisciplinary programs where you can work on one project that draws on many different areas of investigation. Or they look for transdisciplinary projects in which you collaborate with people from other fields. Now, that's all fine. But see, what I'm talking about and what I want to find and support are people who understand the personal and the psychological value of protecting their ability to express themselves in more than one area. Anyone who operates in these disparate fields is always struggling. You know, it never ends because the hostility is between the one field and the other field. You know, the conflict is not an internal one. There's no internal conflict about doing these two things. It's about how it's socially accepted. And so anyone who is working in these two fields is always dealing with hostility from one or another or both directions. And it's intended to encourage people to keep on doing the work that is important to them in these different fields and not ever feel that they have to come to the decision about which field to reject or which field to abandon. For so long, the messages that I was getting from various institutions and representatives of various institutions, that what I was doing was unacceptable, simply did not penetrate, I was just so clueless. I mean, people would give me what I now recognize as clear signals of disapproval, clear warning signals, telling me that if I did not stop doing this other crazy stuff, I would be punished in some way, institutionally punished in some way for continuing to do it. And thereby undercutting the work that I was supposed to be doing for the institution. And I just didn't get it. It's very, very difficult for an institution to adapt itself to the degree of refined individuality of someone who is active in many different fields. Because, they have departments, they have teaching loads, they have a course program, and all of these things have to be systematized and regularized in a certain way so that the institution can function in a continuous way. And so the result of that is that the requirements for fitting into the institution, the requirements for being accepted by one's peers, by one's colleagues in the institution, are really very, very demanding. And so I think what very often happens, in fact, I know that this happens, is that either people decide that they simply cannot go into the institution because they just don't feel accepted for who they are, or else they make this horrible choice where they say, okay, well, I really want to be an astronomer. I really want to do this. And I'm just going to have to stop being an artist. And I know many people who have made this choice. And so, there's this great sense of loss and the sense of grieving because you have to leave this very personally important, integral part of yourself behind in order to move forward in some way or other. And so I think that might be one reason why you don't find people working in two separate academic fields who do this, or who develop these skills outside the academic context. Because institutions, they have to be a bit inflexible about this. And see, that's one of the problems, and I think that that's where the APRA Fellowship can really be of help to people. Well, it has many different parts. There is a part that has to do with making my archive available for people who do research on my work, my library, my art collection, my image library, my family papers, my family photo archive. I mean, there's just all of that. And that will be available to varying extents to people who do research on my work. And I will try to do that in a systematic way so that people don't have to just thrash around, looking for things. But see, the fellowship, the point of the fellowship is to put those resources in the service of people who have done enough of the hard work of self-analysis to understand the costs and the benefits of operating in two different fields the way I do, and really want to pursue research that investigates that, expresses it, embodies it, analyzes it, with a certain degree of self-awareness, so that what I've done can be of use to people in that way. I think that this is a natural expression and byproduct of globalization and the necessity of crossing cultures and subcultures in one's personal experience. I think it is inevitable. And I think that these two processes work in tandem. The more you cross cultures, the more you expose yourself to other social contexts, the easier it becomes to express yourself in different ways and to deal with the ramifications of having, the sorts of exclusionary and ostracizing experiences that come from institutions and social contexts which require that one simply respond in one way and in only that one way. I think that there is a kind of an ideological or psychological factor that may explain some of the resentment that one finds against this kind of multidisciplinarity, and that has to do with integrity. When you have more than one skill available to you and you are exercising it at a professional level, different skills in different professional contexts, then there is no one institution that can ever force you to make the kinds of sacrifices of integrity that institutions very frequently require in order that you meet the goals and standards of the institution. Because you always have this other set of skills that you can draw on and that you can fall back on. And that means that if you can toggle back and forth between these 2 or 3 or however many disciplines, you always find a way of expressing the values that you hold most dearly. And you never have to give up those values. You never have to sacrifice them. And see, I think what leads to resentment is very often the kind of instinctive feeling, which I totally understand, when people who have given their lives to an institution, they've made enormous sacrifices of integrity, of values, of all of the things that are important to them in order to serve the institution. And then they look at someone who refuses to make those sacrifices, and they say, well, I had to do it. Why aren't you doing it? And I think that enough is sufficient to provoke the sense of retaliation. Because, it really is a terrible thing to have to make those sacrifices. If I could find just one person each year, just one person to fund each year, I just would be really happy. Part of the joy for me in doing this is to be able to find out more about these fields and more about how people negotiate their way through and between them. Everybody has children, and everybody knows how painful it is when children stop dancing. They stop drawing, they stop singing, they start turning inward. They go through adolescence and go through these horrible, painful experiences of needing to be accepted by the group and therefore having to let go of certain really important skills. And so I think people can think about this as something that will benefit their children. I also think that it's available for anyone who sees other people struggling with this. People have friends, they have colleagues, they have family members who struggle with this. I think it's fine to think about the fellowship as an encouragement for women who, in addition to whatever fields they're in, also have to wear the hat of being a mother. But in the end, it will be a lot better for the human race if men share equally in the project of child rearing, which is a very, very creative field and requires a lot of resourcefulness. So in the end, this is not going to benefit women more than men. This is for men as well as women, and mothers and fathers together. I absolutely want to encourage anyone and everyone to join forces with me in supporting this project. You know, for themselves, for their friends, for their children, for the future, for the form that globalization takes, for the ability to feel comfortable in different cultural contexts, you know, to feel comfortable around different skills and areas of specialization. I really do feel that this fellowship is, in a certain way, for everyone.